In the heart of Chicago, where the wind whispered secrets through the steel canyons of skyscrapers, Melissa stood in the shadowed opulence of a bathroom, her breath catching in her throat. The marble tiles gleamed under the soft glow of a chandelier, a stark contrast to the storm raging within her. 4 pregnancy tests lay on the counter, each bearing 2 crimson lines that screamed a truth she could scarcely comprehend. She was pregnant with quadruplets. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the sink, her reflection in the gilded mirror, revealing eyes wide with wonder and dread. Melissa, a black woman, whose strength had been forged in the fires of a life less ordinary, felt the weight of her discovery settle like a stone in her chest. The man who had brought her to this gilded cage was Stephen, a white American, whose piercing blue eyes and chiseled features masked a darkness that drew her in and terrified her. He was no ordinary man. Stephen was a kingpin in Chicago's underworld, a mafia boss whose name sent shivers through the city's shadowed alleys. Their love had been a whirlwind, a collision of passion and peril that had swept Melissa into his world. She had fallen for his charisma, the way his voice could soothe like a lullaby, or cut like a blade. But his words from months ago echoed in her mind, each syllable a dagger. "I don't want you to be the mother of my children. If you get pregnant, I'll kill you and them." The memory made her knees buckle, and she sank to the floor, her hands instinctively cradling her abdomen. Outside, the city hummed with life. Lake Michigan's waves lapping against the shore, the distant wail of sirens blending with the jazz notes drifting from a nearby club. But within Stephen's sprawling mansion's Gold Coast walls, time seemed to stand still. The house was a fortress, its elegant facade for the surveillance cameras and armed guards that ensured no one entered or left without Stephen's knowledge. Melissa once saw it as a sanctuary where their love could flourish away from the world's judgment. Now it felt like a prison, its grandeur mocking her growing desperation. She had sensed the change in her body for weeks, the nausea that struck without warning, the dizziness that made the world spin, the cravings for foods she'd never cared for before. A clandestine trip to a pharmacy in Lincoln Park, disguised in a scarf and sunglasses, had confirmed her suspicions. She'd slipped the tests into her purse, her heart pounding as she navigated the bustling streets, every glance from a passerby feeling like an accusation. Now, as she stared at the tests, the reality of her situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. She was carrying 4 lives, 4 innocent souls, who depended on her to protect them from the man she loved. Melissa's fingers brushed against her belly, a silent vow forming in her heart. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered, her voice trembling, but resolute. "No matter what it takes, I won't let him hurt you." The words were a lifeline anchoring her to a purpose greater than her fear. Stephen's threats were not idle. She had seen the coldness in his eyes when he spoke of power of control. He was a man who thrived on dominance, and the idea of her bearing his children seemed to threaten the empire he had built. Yet beneath his ruthlessness, she had glimpsed moments of tenderness nights, when he held her close, his whispers of love soft against her skin. Could that man still exist, or had the monster consumed him entirely? The bathroom door rattled with a sudden forceful knock shattering her reverie. "Melissa, you've been in there forever. What's going on?" Stephen's deep and commanding voice carried a note of impatience that sent a chill down her spine. She scrambled to her feet, shoving the pregnancy tests into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the plastic with a tremor. She splashed water on her face, hoping to erase the evidence of her tears, the redness in her eyes that betrayed her turmoil. "Coming," she called, forcing a lightness into her voice that she didn't feel. She opened the door, and there he stood. Stephen, his blonde hair catching the light, his tailored suit accentuating the broad shoulders that bore the weight of his empire. Sharp as a hawk's, his eyes scanned her face, searching for something she prayed he wouldn't find. "You okay, baby?" he asked, his tone softening as he stepped closer, his hand resting on her waist. The warmth of his touch was a cruel reminder of the love that still bound her to him, even as fear gnawed at her resolve. She lied. "Just got soap in my eyes," her voice steady despite the storm. "I'm fine, Stephen. Let's eat." She brushed past him, her heart racing as she felt the weight of the tests in her pocket. She had to be careful and keep her secret hidden until she could find a way out. Dinner was a quiet affair. The clink of silverware against fine china was the only sound in the cavernous dining room. Stephen's gaze lingered on her, his brow furrowing as he noticed her silence. "Something's wrong," he said, setting down his fork. "Your eyes are red. Have you been crying?" Melissa shook her head, forcing a smile. "No, just the soap. I'm okay, really." But his scrutiny was unrelenting, and she felt the walls closing in. Every word, every glance was a tightrope. She walked, knowing one misstep could unravel everything. As the night wore on, Stephen announced he'd leave for a business meeting in New York the next day, a trip that would keep him away for 24 hours. The news was a spark of hope in Melissa's darkening world. She seized the opportunity, her mind racing with plans. She couldn't stay in this gilded cage, not with 4 lives depending on her. She would need allies, a way to slip past the guards, the cameras, the ever-watchful eyes of Stephen's empire. The city of Chicago, with its labyrinthine streets and hidden corners, would be her refuge if she could reach it. In the quiet of her bedroom, Melissa began to weave her escape. She thought of Manong Leda, the elderly housekeeper who had shown her kindness, and Carlo, the young guard, whose loyalty to Stephen seemed to waver in her presence. Could she trust them? The risk was immense, but so was the alternative. She closed her eyes, picturing her children, faceless, yet infinitely precious, urging her forward. The city outside beckoned a world of danger and possibility, and Melissa knew she had to find a way to reach it, to carve out a future where her babies could grow without fear. The Chicago dawn painted the sky in hues of amber, and rose casting long shadows across the Gold Coast mansion, where Melissa plotted her freedom. The weight of her secret 4 lives growing within her pressed against her heart, a silent drumbeat urging her to act. Stephen's absence, a rare window opened by his trip to New York, was her only chance. With its marble halls and watchful guards, the mansion was a labyrinth. She had to navigate each step a gamble between salvation and ruin. Melissa, her dark eyes sharp with determination, moved with the grace of a woman who had learned to mask fear with purpose. Manang Leda, the housekeeper, whose weathered hands had cleaned these halls for decades, became her unlikely confidant. In the kitchen, where the scent of coffee mingled with the morning air, Melissa found her folding linens, her movements deliberate and calm. "Manang," Melissa whispered, her voice barely audible over the refrigerator's hum. "I need your help. I'm pregnant, quadruplets, and Stephen can't know. He'll kill them, kill me." The words spilled out raw and desperate, and Leda's eyes, deep with the wisdom of years, softened with understanding. "Child, I've raised my own," Leda said, her voice a soothing balm. "I know what it means to protect a life. What do you need?" Her words were a lifeline, and Melissa clung to them, outlining her plan: a midnight escape, a car to slip past the gates, a path to anonymity in the vastness of America. Leda nodded, her face set with resolve. "I'll distract the night staff, but you'll need someone on the outside." That someone was Carlo, a guard, whose youth belied the conflict in his eyes. Melissa approached him in the garden, where the roses bloomed blood-red under the morning sun. Carlo said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I know you're loyal to Stephen, but I'm begging you. Please help me save my children." She saw the hesitation in his posture, the way his fingers tightened around the radio at his belt. But then he met her gaze and something shifted. A flicker of empathy, perhaps, or a memory of his dreams beyond this world of violence. "I'll drive you out," Carlo said finally, his voice low. "But we have to be quick. Stephen's men are everywhere." The plan was set when the clock struck midnight. Carlo would wait in a black sedan at the edge of the property where the cameras were blind. Leda would create a diversion, a spilled tray, a feigned illness to draw the guards' attention. Melissa's heart raced as she prepared, packing a small bag with essentials. A few clothes, her savings, and the pregnancy tests, a tangible reminder of why she was risking everything. The day passed in a haze of tension. Melissa moved through the mansion's routine's breakfast with the staff, a walk in the garden, her face a mask of normalcy. Every sound, every glance from a guard felt like a threat. She avoided the dining room where Stephen's portrait hung, his blue eyes seeming to follow her, a ghost of the man she both loved and feared. Her thoughts drifted to their early days, when his laughter had warmed her soul, when his touch had promised forever. But those memories were tainted now, overshadowed by his threats, his need to control. She wondered if the man she loved still existed, buried beneath the weight of his empire. As night fell, Chicago transformed into a city of lights, its skyline a constellation of ambition and danger. Melissa waited in her room, the darkness her ally. She dressed in black, a scarf draped over her hair to obscure her face. The pregnancy tests were tucked into her pocket, a talisman of her resolve. At 11:50, she heard Leda's voice in the hall, sharp with feigned panic. "I've dropped the china. Someone help!" The guards' footsteps echoed as they rushed to assist, and Melissa slipped out, her heart pounding like a drum. She moved through the shadows, her sneakers silent against the polished floors. The mansion's grandeur was oppressive now, its chandeliers casting eerie glows, its mirrors reflecting a woman she barely recognized. She reached the back door where Carlo waited, his face pale but resolute. "Get in," he whispered, opening the sedan's back door. Melissa slid into the back seat, crouching low as the car rolled toward the gate. Her breath caught as they passed the security post, the guard's flashlight sweeping dangerously close. She saw Stephen's face in her mind, his smile, his rage, and prayed he was still in New York, oblivious to her betrayal. The gate loomed ahead, a steel barrier between captivity and freedom. Carlo flashed his badge, his voice steady as he spoke to the guard. "Routine check." He lied, and the gate creaked open. Melissa's heart soared, but then a figure stepped into the headlights. Another guard, his eyes narrowing. "Who's in the back?" he demanded. Carlo's hand tightened on the wheel, and Melissa felt the world slow, each second a lifetime. "Just supplies," Carlo said, but the guard approached, his hand on his gun. Panic clawed at Melissa's throat, but she forced herself to stay still, her scarf shielding her face. Carlo revved the engine, a subtle warning, and the guard hesitated. "Move along," he said, finally stepping back. The car surged forward, and Melissa exhaled, her body trembling with relief. They sped through Chicago's streets, past the neon-lit bars of Wicker Park, the silent majesty of Lake Michigan. Carlo drove to a Greyhound station where Melissa would catch a bus to Cleveland, a city far enough to vanish, but close enough to reach by dawn. At the station, Carlo handed her a burner phone. "If you need me, call. But don't come back, Melissa. He'll find you." His words were a warning, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. She nodded, clutching the phone, and boarded the bus as the first rays of dawn touched the sky. The city receded behind her, a world of danger she was leaving behind. But as the bus rolled toward Ohio, Melissa's thoughts turned to her children, the 4 lives she carried. She imagined their laughter, their tiny hands in hers, and vowed to build a life where they could thrive free from the shadows of Stephen's empire. Yet even as the miles stretched between her and Chicago, a part of her ached for Stephen, the man who had once promised her the stars, who had held her through sleepless nights. She wondered if he would search for her, if his love could outweigh his rage. The road ahead was uncertain, a path fraught with peril and possibility. But Melissa, with the strength of a mother and the heart of a survivor, knew she would face it all for the sake of her children, her quadruplets, who deserved a world untouched by fear. The city of Cleveland, Ohio, sprawled beneath a sky of bruised clouds, its streets a tapestry of resilience and quiet hope. For 5 years, Melissa had woven herself into its fabric, a black woman whose strength was as much a shield as a beacon for the 4 children she raised alone. In a modest apartment above a bustling cafe in Ohio City, she had carved out a sanctuary far from the gilded cage of Stephen's Chicago mansion. The scent of roasted coffee and fresh pastries drifted through the cracked windows, mingling with the laughter of her quadruplets. Stephanie, Harold, Ashton, and Kobe, whose golden curls and deep brown eyes were a living testament to the love and fear that had shaped their mother's journey. Melissa's days were a delicate dance of survival. By dawn, she donned an apron at the Corner Brew Cafe, her smile a practiced mask as she served lattes to students and artists, her hands steady despite the ache of sleepless nights. The work was grueling, the tips barely enough to cover rent, and the endless needs of 4 growing children. But it was honest. It was freedom. Each night she returned to the cramped apartment where crayon drawings adorned the walls, and her children's chatter drowned out the echoes of her past. With boundless energy, Stephanie would twirl in mismatched dresses, declaring herself a princess. Harold, the quiet observer, sketched intricate cityscapes, his pencil capturing dreams too big for their small world. Ashton, the mischief maker, filled the air with questions, while Kobe, the youngest by minutes, clung to her with a tenderness that melted her heart. Yet beneath the rhythm of this hard-won life, fear lingered like a shadow. Melissa had changed her name to Lisa Carter, her identity buried beneath forged documents and whispered lies. She avoided photographs, kept her social circle small, and taught her children to call her mama in public. Never mommy, lest a stray word betray them. Stephen's reach was long, his empire a web stretched across state lines. She had seen his face on news reports. Stephen Castillo, the enigmatic businessman linked to Chicago's underworld, his blue eyes cold as ice in grainy footage. Each sighting was a reminder of the man she had loved, the man who had vowed to destroy her, and the lives she now protected. The quadruplets were her anchor, their innocence, a flame she guarded fiercely. At 4 years old, they were a whirlwind of curiosity, their resemblance to Stephen both a blessing and a curse. Their golden hair caught the sunlight like his, but their eyes deep and soulful were hers, a mirror of her resilience. She told them stories of a father away on a long trip, a fiction spun to shield them from the truth. But as they grew, their questions sharpened. "Why don't we have a daddy like other kids?" Ashton asked one evening, his small hands clutching a toy car. Melissa's heart clenched, but she smiled, brushing a curl from his forehead. "He's out there, sweetheart, keeping the world safe. One day you'll understand." Her nights were haunted by memories of Chicago, the way Stephen's touch had once set her soul alight, the promises whispered in the quiet of their shared bed. She had loved him fiercely, a love born in stolen moments at jazz clubs and late-night drives along Lake Michigan. But his world had consumed him, turning the man she adored into a stranger who spoke of death with chilling calm. She wondered if he searched for her, if his anger had softened into regret, or if he had forgotten her entirely. The thought was a wound she carried silently, her heart torn between longing and resolve. The decision to leave Cleveland came on a crisp autumn morning, when the leaves outside her window burned red and gold. Her mother, living in New Orleans, had fallen ill, and Melissa yearned to reconnect with the family she had left behind. The journey would be risky, airports were watched, and Stephen's influence reached far, but the pull of home was stronger. She booked tickets to New Orleans, her hands trembling as she packed a suitcase with the children's clothes and a few cherished mementos, a locket from her mother, a drawing Harold had made of their family, complete with a faceless father. The Cleveland Hopkins International Airport buzzed with the chaos of travelers, a sea of faces that made Melissa's pulse race. She held her children close, Stephanie's hand in hers, Harold's backpack slung over her shoulder, Ashton and Kobe trailing behind with wide-eyed wonder. The terminal's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, and every glance from a stranger felt like a threat. She had taught the children a game spot, the safe faces, those who smiled kindly. But today, her instincts screamed danger. As they approached the gate for their flight, Stephanie tugged at her sleeve, pointing toward a man in a tailored suit near the coffee stand. "Mama, he looks like the man in your stories," Stephanie whispered, her voice bright with excitement. Melissa's blood ran cold. There across the crowded terminal stood Stephen. His blonde hair gleamed under the lights, his presence commanding even in the mundane bustle of the airport. He spoke to a man in a leather jacket, his posture relaxed, but his eyes scanning the crowd. Melissa's breath caught her mind racing. Had he found her? Was this chance? Or had his network finally closed in? She tightened her grip on Stephanie's hand, her voice low and urgent. "Stay close, baby. We're almost there." But fate, cruel and capricious, had other plans. As they moved toward the gate, Stephanie broke free, her small legs carrying her toward Stephen. "Daddy!" she called, her voice cutting through the din. Melissa's heart stopped, the world narrowing to the sight of her daughter running toward the man she had fled. Stephen's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Stephanie, then lifting to meet Melissa's. In that moment, time seemed to freeze, the airport fading into a blur as their gazes collided. Hers filled with fear, his with a storm of recognition and something deeper, something that looked dangerously like love. The air in Cleveland Hopkins International Airport hung heavy with the weight of unspoken truths as Melissa stood frozen, her daughter's voice echoing in her ears. Stephanie's cry of, "Daddy," shattered the fragile veil of anonymity she had woven for over 5 years. Stephen, the man whose shadow had haunted her dreams, now stood mere feet away, his blue eyes piercing through the crowd to find her. The terminal's clamor announcements crackling over speakers. The shuffle of footsteps faded into a distant hum, leaving only the pounding of Melissa's heart and the unbearable intensity of his gaze. He was no longer just a memory. He was here, real and inescapable, a white American kingpin whose presence seemed to bend the world around him. Stephanie clung to Stephen's leg, her golden curls bouncing as she looked up at him with unbridled joy. "You're here. I knew you weren't gone forever," she chirped, oblivious to the storm between the adults. Harold, Ashton, and Kobe clustered behind Melissa, their eyes wide with confusion and curiosity. Melissa's instincts screamed to run to scoop up her children and flee to the safety of the New Orleans-bound plane. But Stephen's gaze held her captive, a mix of shock, anger, and something softer, perhaps regret, or a longing she dared not name. "Melissa." He said, his voice low and steady, cutting through the chaos like a blade. He stepped forward, Stephanie still clinging to him, and the man in the leather jacket melted into the crowd, leaving them in a fragile bubble of confrontation. "These are my children, aren't they?" His words were not a question but a statement, laced with certainty, making her stomach churn. She forced herself to stand taller, her dark eyes flashing with defiance. "They're mine, Stephen. I raised them. You don't get to claim them now." Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze, her love for her children, a fire that burned brighter than her fear. Sensing the tension, the quadruplets pressed closer to her, their small hands grasping at her coat. Stephen's jaw tightened, but his expression softened as he looked down at Stephanie, who beamed up at him. "She called me Daddy," he said, his voice quieter now, almost tender. "Look at them, Melissa. They have my hair, my features. You can't deny what's true." He crouched to Stephanie's level, brushing a curl from her face. "What's your name?" "Princess Stephanie," she declared, then pointed to her siblings. "That's Harold, Ashton, and Kobe. We're going to see Grandma in New Orleans." Her innocence was a knife in Melissa's heart, each word unraveling the life she had built to keep them safe. Stephen stood, his eyes returning to Melissa, now burning with a resolve that sent a shiver down her spine. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. "Not with my children. Not without me." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, and Melissa felt the weight of his world, the Mafia, the power, the danger pressing against her. "I don't belong to you anymore," she snapped, her voice rising. "You made that clear when you threatened to kill me to kill them." She gestured to the children, her hands shaking. "I've kept them safe for 5 years. You don't get to walk in and take that away." Stephen's face darkened, but he didn't raise his voice. "You think I don't know what I did?" He said, his words heavy with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "I was trying to protect you, Melissa. My world. It's not safe for you, for them. But they're mine, and I won't let you run again." He paused, his eyes softening. "Come back to Chicago. Let me make this right." The airport seemed to close in around them, the crowd a blur of indifferent faces. Melissa's mind raced, weighing her options. She could fight, scream, draw attention. But Stephen's influence was vast, his men likely watching from the shadows. She thought of the cameras in his mansion, the guards who obeyed his every command. Running now would only delay the inevitable. Her children's safety was her priority. She knew Stephen would never let them go. "Fine," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this isn't for you. It's for them." She looked at her children, their faces a mix of confusion and hope, and her heart ached. She would return to Chicago, to the mansion that had once been her prison, but she would do it on her terms, for her children's sake. The drive back to Chicago was silent, the city's skyline rising like a fortress as they approached. Stephen sat in the front of the black SUV, his driver a quiet sentinel, while Melissa and the quadruplets huddled in the back. Stephanie chattered about the plane they didn't board, while Harold stared out the window, his quiet intensity a mirror of Melissa's own. Ashton and Kobe whispered to each other, their eyes darting to Stephen, curious about the man they had only known through their mother's vague stories. The Gold Coast mansion loomed as they arrived, its iron gates swinging open with a groan. Inside, the familiar opulence greeted them: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, the faint scent of roses from the garden. But it was different now, filled with the presence of her children, who ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the halls. Stephen watched them, a flicker of awe in his eyes. And for a moment, Melissa saw the man she had loved, the man who had danced with her under Chicago's stars, who had promised her a future before his world consumed him. That night, as the children slept in rooms hastily prepared for them. Stephen found Melissa in the library, its shelves lined with books she had once read to escape. "I know you hate me," he said, his voice soft, almost broken. "But I didn't know about them, Melissa. If I had, I would have." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I would have done things differently." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "You threatened to kill me, Stephen. You locked me in this house, controlled every move I made. How am I supposed to believe you now?" Her voice cracked, the weight of 5 years of fear and solitude spilling out. He stepped closer, his hands raised as if to show he meant no harm. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice raw. "My enemies, they'd use you. Use our children to destroy me. I thought pushing you away would keep you safe. But I was wrong, Melissa. I've been bad about so many things." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her heart torn between the man before her and the monster of her memories. "I need time," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "For them, I'll stay. But don't think this means I forgive you." She turned away, leaving him in the dimly lit room, his silhouette a reminder of the battle she now faced, not just for her children, but for her heart. As she climbed the stairs to check on her sleeping children, Melissa felt the weight of Chicago's skyline beyond the windows, a city of secrets and second chances. Stephen was a storm she could not outrun, but for her quadruplets, she would face him, navigate his world, and find a way to protect the family she had fought so hard to keep. The future was uncertain, a path lined with danger and desire, but Melissa's love for her children was a flame that would guide her through the darkness. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the arched windows of Stephen's Gold Coast mansion, its lights a constellation of promises and perils, mirroring the turmoil in Melissa's heart. The mansion, with its marble floors and soaring ceilings, was no longer just a prison. It had become a battlefield where love and distrust clashed. Melissa, a black woman whose resilience had carried her through 5 years of solitude, now navigated this opulent cage with her 4 children. Stephanie, Harold, Ashton, and Kobe, whose laughter filled the halls, starkly contrasting the tension between their parents. Stephen, the white American Mafia kingpin, whose blue eyes held both menace and longing, was determined to prove he could be more than the monster of her memories. Each morning, Melissa awoke to the sounds of her quadruplets, their voices a symphony that grounded her. Stephanie would bound into the kitchen, her golden curls bouncing as she demanded pancakes, while Harold sketched quietly at the table, his pencil tracing dreams of a world beyond these walls. Ashton, ever the instigator, teased Kobe, whose gentle smile melted even the hardest hearts. Yet, as she watched them, Melissa's thoughts drifted to Stephen. He was everywhere, lurking in the shadows of the mansion, his presence a constant reminder of the life she had fled, and the love she could not entirely escape. Stephen had changed since their reunion at the Cleveland airport. Gone was the cold detachment that had once defined him. In its place was a man who knelt to tie Stephanie's shoes, laughed at Ashton's antics, and listened to Harold's quiet musings with a patience that surprised her. He cooked breakfast for the children, his tailored shirt sleeves rolled up as he flipped pancakes, the scent of maple syrup mingling with the morning air. He read bedtime stories, his deep voice weaving tales of dragons and heroes, and the children adored him, their eyes bright with a trust Melissa envied. Yet she held herself apart, her heart guarded by the scars of his threats, his control, his world of violence. One evening, as the sun dipped below Lake Michigan, painting the sky in crimson and gold, Melissa found herself in the mansion's library, its shelves a haven of leather-bound books and forgotten dreams. She was tracing the spine of a novel when Stephen entered, his footsteps soft but deliberate. "Melissa," he said, his voice a low melody, that stirred memories of their past. "We need to talk." She turned her dark eyes wary. "What's there to say, Stephen? I'm here for the kids, not for you." Her words were sharp, a shield against the vulnerability his presence evoked. He stepped closer, his blonde hair catching the lamplight, his expression a mix of resolve and regret. "I know I hurt you," he said, his voice raw. "But there's something you need to know." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded document. "5 years ago, I did something I never told you about." Melissa's breath caught as he handed her the paper. It was a marriage certificate signed in Las Vegas the month before her escape. Her name was there alongside his, Melissa Carter and Stephen Castillo, bound by a secret vow. "What is this?" she whispered, her fingers trembling as she traced the ink. "I married you," Stephen said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I knew you were planning to leave. I couldn't let you go, not without tying you to me. I thought it would keep you safe, that my name would protect you from my enemies. But I was wrong, Melissa. I pushed you away instead." Her heart pounded a storm of anger and confusion. "You married me without my consent," she said, her voice rising. "You locked me in this house, threatened my life, and now you tell me we're married. How am I supposed to trust you?" Stephen's face fell, but he didn't back away. "I was a fool," he admitted. "I thought control was the only way to keep you safe. My world, it's a war zone. I couldn't bear the thought of you or our children caught in it. But I see them now, Melissa. I see you. And I want to be the man you deserve, not the one you fear." His words hung in the air, a fragile bridge between them. Melissa wanted to believe him, to let the love she had once felt bloom again. But the weight of his past betrayal was a chain around her heart. "I need time," she said, her voice soft but firm. "For the kids, I'll stay. But don't expect me to fall back into your arms." The days that followed were a delicate dance. Stephen threw himself into fatherhood, taking the children to Lincoln Park Zoo, their laughter echoing as they marveled at the lions. He taught Harold to draw, his large hands carefully guiding the boy's pencil. He chased Ashton through the garden, their game of tag, a burst of joy that made Melissa's heart ache. Stephanie clung to him, calling him Daddy, with a trust that warmed and terrified her. Kobe, the quietest, would curl up beside Stephen, his small hand in his father's. And Melissa saw glimpses of the man she had loved, a man who might still exist beneath the Mafia's shadow. Yet the mansion was a reminder of Stephen's world. Guards patrolled the grounds, their radios crackling with coded messages. Phone calls came at odd hours, Stephen's voice low and urgent as he spoke of business in New York or Detroit. Melissa overheard snippets, names of men she didn't know, deals cloaked in secrecy, and her fear returned. She began to notice the cameras, their lenses glinting in corners she hadn't seen before. Was he watching her still, even now? The thought chilled her, but so did the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, the way his hand lingered near hers, as if afraid to touch. One night, as a summer storm raged outside, Melissa found Stephen in the kitchen, his shirt damp from the rain. He was pouring coffee, the steam rising like a confession. He said, "I used to watch the storms with you not looking at her. You'd stand by the window, your face lit by lightning, and I'd think you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." Her breath caught memories, flooding back nights, when they danced in the rain, his laughter a melody against the thunder. She said that was a long time ago, her voice barely audible. "I'm not that woman anymore, Stephen." He turned his eyes, searching hers. "You're stronger now, braver, but you're still here, Melissa. And I'm still the man who loves you, even if I don't deserve you." He stepped closer, and for a moment she didn't pull away. The air between them crackled, a spark of the past, threatening to ignite. But she stepped back, her heart racing, and left him in the kitchen, the storm outside mirroring the one within her. As she tucked her children into bed, their faces peaceful in sleep, Melissa felt the weight of her choices. She was back in Stephen's world, surrounded by his love and danger. The marriage certificate burned in her mind, a symbol of his control, but also his desperation to keep her. Could she trust him? Could she love him again? The answers eluded her, but for her children, she would stay navigating this fragile truce in a mansion that held both her past and her uncertain future. The Chicago summer unfurled in a blaze of heat and color, the city's pulse a vibrant counterpoint to the quiet transformation unfolding within the Gold Coast mansion. Melissa, her dark skin glowing under the sunlight that streamed through the windows, moved through her days cautiously, her heart a battleground where love and doubt waged war. Her quadruplets, Stephanie, Harold, Ashton, and Kobe, filled the mansion with life, their laughter a melody that softened the edges of her fear. Stephen, the white American Mafia boss, whose presence was both a comfort and a threat, was rewriting his story not as a kingpin, but as a father and a man seeking redemption. Yet the shadows of his past loomed large, and Melissa knew that trust once broken was a fragile thing to rebuild. The revelation of their secret marriage had shaken Melissa, the Las Vegas certificate, a wound that bled questions. Why had Stephen bound her to him without her knowledge? Was it love or another form of control? She carried the weight silently, her days spent balancing motherhood and the tentative steps toward understanding the man she had once fled. Stephen's efforts were undeniable. He built a treehouse in the garden for the children, its wooden slats painted with their names. He took them to Millennium Park, where they chased pigeons and ate ice cream under the bean's silver curves. Each gesture chipped away at her defenses, but the memory of his threats lingered a ghost that refused to fade. One evening, as the city settled into a twilight hush, Melissa sat on the mansion's terrace, the lake breeze carrying the scent of jasmine. Stephen joined her, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. He said, "I owe you the truth," his voice low as if afraid the words might break her. "About why I pushed you away, why I said those things." She turned to him, her eyes guarded, but curious. "Then, tell me, Stephen. Please help me understand why I had to run, why I had to hide our children from you." He took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly. 5 years ago, I was at war. He began with rival families and me. I'd built an empire, Melissa, but it was crumbling. The Detroit crew, Santino's men, were closing in, targeting anyone I cared about. I saw what they did to families, to women like you. You'd stay safe if I scared you or made you hate me. I married you in secret because I couldn't let you go. But I couldn't keep you close either. I was wrong, and I lost you because of it. His words were a revelation, each one peeling back layers of pain. Melissa's heart ached, torn between the man before her and the one who had haunted her nightmares. "You could have told me," she said, her voice trembling. "I loved you, Stephen. I would have fought beside you." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away this time. "I know that now," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. "I've spent 5 years regretting it. When I saw Stephanie at the airport, I saw all of them and knew I had to improve. For them, for you." The confession hung between them, a fragile thread of hope. Melissa wanted to believe him, to let the love she had buried rise again, but trust was a slow bloom. "I need more than words," she said. "Please show me you've changed." Stephen's response came not in promises, but in action. He planned a real wedding, not a secret forged in fear. He chose a historic church in Chicago's Loop, its stained glass windows casting rainbows over the pews. He invited Melissa's parents from New Orleans, their presence a balm to her homesick heart. The children were part of the plan, their excitement palpable as they tried on tiny suits and dresses, Stephanie twirling in white lace, declaring herself the flower princess. The wedding day dawned bright, the city alive with the hum of summer. Melissa stood before a mirror in the mansion, her gown a cascade of ivory silk that hugged her curves. Her mother, her eyes misty, adjusted her veil. "He loves you, baby," she said. "I see it in the way he looks at you, and the way he cares for those babies. Give him a chance." Melissa nodded her heart, a tangle of hope and hesitation. As she walked down the aisle with the children at her side, she saw Stephen waiting at the altar, his blue eyes bright with tears. The church was filled with light, the organ's notes soaring as she approached. He took her hand, his touch warm and steady, and whispered, "You're my home, Melissa. Always have been." The vows they exchanged were a promise reborn, a pledge to build a family not on fear, but love. The reception was joyful, held in the mansion's ballroom, its chandeliers sparkling like stars. The children danced their laughter, mingling with the jazz band's melody. Melissa's father toasted to new beginnings, his voice thick with emotion. As she danced with Stephen, his arms a haven, she felt the stirrings of forgiveness, a fragile hope that they could rewrite their story. But even as they celebrated, the city outside whispered of danger. Stephen's world was not so easily left behind, and Melissa sensed it in the guarded glances of his men, the phone calls he took in hushed tones. As they stood together watching their children chase fireflies in the garden, she wondered if love could truly conquer the shadows that still hunted them. The night was theirs, but the future was a question mark, a promise laced with uncertainty that only time could answer. The Chicago summer waned, its golden light softening into the amber hues of early autumn, casting a warm glow over the Gold Coast mansion, where Melissa and her quadruplets had begun to forge a fragile new life. Once a gilded cage, the mansion now hummed with the laughter of Stephanie, Harold, Ashton, and Kobe, their voices weaving a tapestry of joy that almost drowned out the unease in Melissa's heart. As a black woman who had fought for her children's safety through years of solitude, she stood at the precipice of hope, her love for her family tempered by the shadows of Stephen's world. Stephen, the white American Mafia boss, whose blue eyes held both devotion and danger, had vowed to change to be the husband and father they deserved. Yet the city beyond the mansion's iron gates whispered of threats that could unravel their newfound harmony. Melissa had grown accustomed to the rhythm of their days' mornings, filled with the scent of coffee and the chatter of her children, afternoons spent in the garden, where Stephen pushed Kobe on a swing or helped Stephanie plant marigolds. The children adored him, their trust bridging the past and the present. Harold's sketches now included Stephen, a tall figure with a gentle smile, while Ashton's mischief found a playful match in his father's teasing. Yet Melissa's heart remained guarded, her trust a fragile bloom. The secret marriage Stephen had revealed, the Las Vegas vow that bound them without her consent, lingered like a bruise. His confession in the church, his promise to protect them, had softened her resolve. But the specter of his Mafia life loomed large. It was a crisp September morning when danger struck, shattering the illusion of safety. Melissa had taken the children to Grant Park, a rare outing, to let them run free under the city's open sky. The park was alive with families, the air filled with the scent of grilled hot dogs and the distant strum of a street musician's guitar. Stephanie twirled in a sundress, her laughter bright, while Harold and Kobe chased Ashton through the grass, their shouts echoing. Melissa watched from a bench, her dark eyes scanning the crowd, an instinct honed by years of hiding. She felt a prickle of unease, a sensation she couldn't shake, as if the city held its breath. The black van appeared without warning, screeching to a halt near the park's edge. 3 men in dark jackets emerged, their movements swift and purposeful. Melissa's heart lurched as she recognized the glint of menace in their eyes, a look she had seen in Stephen's world. "Kids, come here." She called, her voice sharp and urgent. But before she could gather them, one of the men grabbed her arm, his grip iron tight. "Melissa Carter," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "You're coming with us." Panic surged through her, but she fought to keep her voice steady. "Let me go," she said, her eyes darting to her children, who froze in confusion. "Stephanie, run to the playground. Find help." Stephanie's eyes widened, but she obeyed, grabbing Kobe's hand and pulling him away. Harold and Ashton hesitated, their small faces pale, but Melissa's fierce glare sent them running after their sister. The man's grip tightened and another figure appeared, a scarf masking his face. "Santino sends his regards," he said, his voice dripping with malice. Melissa's blood ran cold. Santino, the name Stephen had mentioned in hushed tones. The leader of a rival Detroit crew, whose vendetta against her husband was a storm waiting to break. Before she could scream, a cloth pressed against her mouth, the chemical scent overwhelming her senses. Her vision blurred, her body growing heavy as she sank into darkness, the sound of her children's distant cries haunting her fading consciousness. She awoke in a dank warehouse on the outskirts of Detroit, the air thick with the smell of oil and rust. Her wrists were bound, the rough rope biting into her skin. The warehouse was a cavern of shadows, its high ceilings echoing with the drip of water and the low voices of her captors. Santino stood before her, a wiry man with a cruel smile, his eyes glinting like a predator's. "You're the key, Melissa," he said, circling her like a vulture. "Stephen took everything from me, my brother, my empire. Now I'll take what's his." Melissa's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin, her voice steady despite her fear. "Stephen's not a saint, but he's not a monster like you. He'd never kill without reason." Her words were a defiance, a shield for the man she was beginning to trust again. Santino's laugh was cold, his hand striking her cheek with a force that sent stars dancing across her vision. "Your loyalty's touching," he sneered, "but it won't save you. He'll come for you. When he does, he'll die." In Chicago, Stephen's world had erupted into chaos. The call came as he sat in his office, a room lined with maps and coded ledgers, the heart of his empire. His associate Brian burst in, his face pale. "They've got Melissa," he said, his voice tight. "Santino's men. They took her from Grant Park." Stephen's blood turned to ice, his mind flashing to the children, to Melissa's defiant eyes, to the life they were building. He grabbed his phone, pulling up the park's CCTV footage, his hands shaking as he watched the van speed away, Melissa's form limp in a stranger's arms. He summoned his crew, Brian Zek and Daniel Men, who had fought beside him for years. "Find her," he ordered, his voice a blade. "Santino wants a war. He'll get one." But beneath his rage was a fear he hadn't felt since the night Melissa fled 5 years ago. He saw her face in his mind, her strength, her love for their children, and knew he couldn't lose her again. The children were safe, hidden in the mansion with Leda, their small faces etched with worry. "Daddy, where's Mama?" "Stephanie?" asked her voice trembling. Stephen knelt, pulling her close. "I'll bring her back, Princess," he promised, his heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. As night fell over Detroit, Melissa sat in the warehouse, her mind racing. She thought of her children, their laughter, their trust in her. She thought of Stephen, who had hurt her, but was now fighting to prove his love. The ropes cut into her wrists, but her resolve was steel. She had survived 5 years alone. She would survive this. She whispered to the lives she carried, her children, her strength. "Hold on, babies. Mama's coming home. Stephen's plan was forming a desperate gambit to save the woman who was his heart. He knew Santino's game, the trap, waiting in Detroit's shadows. But for Melissa and their family, he would walk into hell, his love a fire that burned brighter than fear. The city of Chicago watched its skyline, a silent witness to a love tested by danger, a family on the brink of loss or redemption. The Detroit night was a shroud of ink and steel, its industrial heart pulsing with the hum of distant factories and the threat of violence. Melissa sat bound in a derelict warehouse on the city's edge, her dark eyes blazing with defiance, despite the ache in her cheek where Santino's hand had struck. The air was heavy with the scent of rust and fear, the dim light casting long shadows that danced like specters across the concrete floor. As a black woman who had fought for her children's safety through years of solitude, Melissa clung to the image of her quadruplets. Stephanie's bright laughter, Harold's quiet sketches, Ashton's mischief, Kobe's gentle touch. They were her anchor, her reason to endure, even as Santino's cruel smile promised pain. Stephen moved like a storm in Chicago, his white-hot rage tempered by a love that burned deeper than his empire. The news of Melissa's kidnapping had shattered the fragile peace he had built each moment, without her a wound in his soul. His office, a fortress of maps and monitors, buzzed with the urgency of his crew, Brian Zeck and Daniel Men forged in the crucible of his world. The CCTV footage from Grant Park played on a loop, Melissa's form vanishing into the black van, a nightmare etched in grainy pixels. Stephen's blue eyes, usually cold with command, were raw with fear as he planned the rescue, his heart whispering her name with every beat. "I go in first," he told his men, his voice a low growl. "Santino wants me. Let him think he's won." Brian nodded, his face grim, while Zeck checked the weapons, their steel glinting under the office's harsh lights. The strategist, Daniel, mapped the warehouse's layout, a labyrinth of crates and shadows. "It's a trap," Daniel warned. "Santino's not stupid. He'll have men everywhere." Stephen's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be smarter," he said, his mind racing to the woman who had fled him, who had raised his children, who had become his reason to fight. In the warehouse, Melissa's thoughts were a lifeline to her family. She remembered Stephen's touch during their wedding, and his hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger. She thought of his confession, the war that had driven him to push her away. Santino's voice broke her reverie, his footsteps echoing as he approached. "He's coming," he taunted, a gun dangling in his hand. "Your precious Stephen will walk right into my hands, and you'll watch him die." Melissa's heart clenched, but she met his gaze, her voice steady. "You don't know him," she said. "He'll burn this place down before he lets you win." Her words were a challenge, a spark of defiance that made Santino's smile falter. She thought of her children safe in the mansion with Leda, and prayed they would never know this darkness. Stephen's team moved under the cover of night, their black SUVs cutting through Detroit's empty streets. The warehouse loomed ahead, its rusted walls a fortress of menace. Stephen led the charge, his gun a cold weight in his hand. He slipped through a side entrance, his men fanning to flank the building. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the creak of metal and the distant hum of a generator. He moved like a shadow, his heart pounding to find Melissa, see her dark eyes, and know she was safe. Inside, he spotted her bound to a chair, her face bruised, but her spirit unbroken. Santino stood nearby, his men scattered like wolves waiting to strike. Stephen's eyes locked with Melissa's, a silent vow passing between them. "Santino," he called, stepping into the light, his gun raised. "Let her go. This is between you and me." Santino laughed, his gun trained on Melissa. "You're predictable, Castillo," he sneered. "You think you can save her? You'll die trying." The words were a spark, igniting the warehouse into chaos. Gunfire erupted Stephen's men, engaging Santino's crew in a deadly dance. Stephen moved toward Melissa, his focus unwavering, but Santino was faster. He grabbed her, pressing the gun to her temple, his voice a hiss. "One step closer, and she's gone." Melissa's eyes met Stephen's, a silent plea to trust her. She twisted, slamming her shoulder into Santino, buying Stephen a moment. He lunged, tackling Santino to the ground, the gun skittering across the floor. The fight was brutal, fists and fury, but Stephen's strength was fueled by love. As Santino reached for a knife, Brian appeared, his shot ringing out, catching Santino's arm. The rival boss howled, and Stephen seized the chance, pinning him down. Melissa, freed by Zek's quick hands, ran to Stephen, her heart in her throat. But as they turned to flee, Santino, wounded but defiant, grabbed a fallen gun and fired. Stephen saw it coming, his body moving instinctively to shield Melissa. The bullet tore through his chest, a searing pain that sent him to his knees. Melissa screamed, catching him as he fell, her hands stained with his blood. "Stephen, no!" she cried, her voice breaking as she pressed against the wound, willing him to stay with her. The warehouse was a blur of chaos. Gunfire, shouts, the acrid smell of smoke. Stephen's men overpowered Santino's crew, and the rival boss was subdued and bound. But Melissa's world narrowed to Stephen, his face pale, his breath shallow. "I love you," he whispered, his hand weak against her cheek. "I'm sorry. For everything. Don't you dare leave me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "The kids need you. I need you." She held him close, her strength a beacon in the darkness, as Brian and Zek rushed to their side, calling for a medic. The sound of sirens grew closer, a lifeline in the night. They raced to a Detroit hospital, Stephen's life hanging by a thread. Melissa sat in the waiting room, her hands trembling, her mind a storm of memories, their first dance wedding, and how he had looked at their children. Brian sat beside her, his voice steady. "He's fought worse," he said. "He's fighting for you now." Melissa nodded, her heart clinging to hope. In the quiet of the hospital, she felt a flutter in her abdomen, a reminder of the new life she carried. She hadn't told Stephen yet, hadn't found the words. But as she waited, praying for his survival, she knew this was their chance to build something new. A family forged not in fear, but in love. The city outside hummed with life, its pulse a mirror of her own, and Melissa held on to the belief that Stephen would return to her, that their story was not yet over. The Chicago autumn painted the city in hues of amber and crimson, its crisp air carrying the promise of change, as the Gold Coast mansion stood sentinel over a family reborn. Melissa, her dark skin radiant against the soft glow of morning light, moved through the mansion with a quiet strength, her heart a tapestry woven from love and lingering fear. The Quadruplets, Stephanie, Harold, Ashton, and Kobe, filled the halls with their boundless energy, their laughter a balm to the wounds of the past. Stephen, the white American Mafia boss, whose blue eyes once held only menace, now bore the scars of his sacrifice, his chest bandaged from the bullet that had nearly claimed him in Detroit. The hospital's sterile halls were behind them, but the shadow of that night lingered, a reminder of the fragility of their newfound peace. Melissa had not left Stephen's side in the hospital, her hand clasped in his through the long hours of surgery, her prayers a silent chant for his survival. When he opened his eyes, his voice weak but steady, he whispered her name, which anchored her to hope. "I'm here," she had said, tears streaming down her face, her love for him, a fire that burned through her doubts. Now, back in the mansion, she watched him with their children, his movements slow but deliberate, each smile a testament to his will to live for them, for her. The days were a delicate dance of recovery. Once, a towering figure of control, Stephen was now vulnerable, his strength sapped by the wound that had torn through him. Yet he refused to retreat into the shadows of his empire. He sat with Harold at the kitchen table, guiding the boy's pencil as they sketched Chicago's skyline, the Willis Tower rising like a dream. He chased Stephanie through the garden, her giggles echoing as he pretended to stumble, his laughter warm, despite the pain in his chest. Ashton and Kobe trailed him, their small hands tugging at his sleeves, their questions endless. "Daddy, why do you have a scar?" Kobe asked, his eyes wide. Stephen knelt, his voice soft. "It's a reminder, buddy, that I'll do anything to keep you safe." Melissa watched these moments from a distance, her heart torn between the man she saw and the one she had feared. She had told Stephen of her pregnancy in the hospital, her voice trembling as she shared the news of their new child. His eyes had lit up a spark of joy amidst the pain, and he had pulled her close, whispering, "This time, I'll be there every step." The promise lingered, a vow she wanted to believe, but the weight of his world, the Mafia, the enemies, the secrets pressed against her. One evening, as the city settled into a twilight hush, Melissa found herself in the mansion's library, its shelves a haven of stories and solace. She was tracing the pages of a poetry book when Stephen entered his steps, careful, his face etched with a quiet determination. "Melissa," he said, his voice a melody that stirred memories of their early days, when love was uncomplicated, a dance under Chicago's stars. "I need to talk to you." She closed the book, her dark eyes meeting his. "What is it, Stephen?" Her voice was soft, but there was a guarded edge, a reminder of the trust still being rebuilt. He sat beside her, his hand resting on the arm of her chair, close but not touching. "I'm trying to change," he said, his words raw. "I can't undo what I've done, but I'm working to get out. The business and the deals, I'm handing them over to Brian and Zek. I want a life with you, with our kids, not this." He gestured vaguely, as if encompassing the unseen dangers that lurked beyond the mansion's walls. "But it's not simple. Santino's crew is scattered, but others will come. I need you to know I'm fighting for us." Melissa's heart clenched, the weight of his words settling over her. She saw the truth in his eyes, the fear of losing her, the resolve to protect their family. "I want to believe you," she said, her voice trembling. "But your world, it's taken so much already. How do I know it won't take you too?" He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "Because I'm not the man I was," he said. "You and the kids, you're my world now. I'll walk away from it all, whatever it takes." His thumb traced circles on her skin, a silent promise sending her a shiver. She let herself lean into his touch for the first time in years, her heart daring to hope. The weeks that followed were a testament to his words. Stephen scaled back his operations, delegating to his trusted lieutenants, his phone calls growing fewer, his nights spent with the family. He cooked dinners, the kitchen filled with the scent of rosemary and garlic, the children crowding around as he taught them to knead dough. He took them to the Art Institute, their small hands clutching his as they marveled at paintings, their questions a chorus of wonder. Melissa watched her love for him, blooming like a flower in spring, tentative but undeniable. One night, as a gentle rain pattered against the windows, Stephen found her on the terrace, her silhouette framed by the city's lights. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice low, his eyes tracing the curve of her cheek. "I don't deserve you, Melissa, but I'll spend my life trying to." She turned to him, her heart racing. "You're getting there," she said, a smile breaking through her reserve. "Keep trying." He laughed, a sound that warmed the night, and for a moment they stood together, The rain, a soft curtain around them. Their love, a fragile but growing flame. But even as they rebuilt the city, whispered of danger. Stephen's men reported rumors of unrest of rival factions eyeing his weakened state. Melissa felt the tension in Brian's voice when he visited in the guarded glances of the guards. She knew their peace was borrowed, a moment stolen from a world that never slept. As she tucked her children into bed, their faces peaceful in sleep, she whispered a vow to protect them, to hold on to this love, even as the shadows gathered. The Chicago winter draped the city in a mantle of frost, its skyline a jagged silhouette against a sky of endless gray. Warmth bloomed within the Gold Coast mansion, a haven forged by love and resilience. Melissa, her dark skin glowing with the radiance of motherhood, cradled her newborn daughters, Andrea, Elisa, and Shira. 3 tiny miracles who had joined their siblings, Stephanie, Harold, Ashton, and Kobe, to make a family of 7. The mansion, once a fortress of fear, now echoed with the chaos of children, their voices a symphony that drowned out the city's restless pulse. Stephen, the white American Mafia boss, whose scars told tales of sacrifice, stood at the heart of this family, his blue eyes softened by a love that had weathered storms. 3 years had passed since the night in Detroit, when Stephen's blood had stained Melissa's hands, his life hanging by a thread. His recovery had been a journey of patience and promise, each day a step toward the man he wanted to be. The birth of their triplets had been a celebration, a testament to their enduring bond. Melissa had labored under the soft lights of a Chicago hospital. Stephen at her side, his hand steady in hers as she brought their daughters into the world. As she watched him with their children, she saw a man transformed, not free of his past, but fighting to rise above it. The mansion was a whirlwind of activity. Stephanie, now 7, ruled the household with her boundless energy, her golden curls bouncing as she directed her siblings in elaborate make-believe games. Harold, the quiet artist, filled notebooks with sketches of their family, his talent blooming under Stephen's encouragement. Ashton, ever the troublemaker, left a trail of chaos, spilled juice-broken toys, while Kobe, the gentle soul, followed Melissa like a shadow, his small hand in hers. The triplets, barely 3, were a storm of giggles and mischief, their dark eyes mirroring their mother's, their laughter, a melody that filled the halls. Melissa's days were a delicate balance of motherhood and vigilance. She taught the children at home their lessons, a mix of math and stories, her voice weaving tales of courage and love. Stephen joined them, his deep voice reading poetry, his laughter mingling with theirs. Yet the weight of his world lingered. He had stepped back from the Mafia, delegating to Brian and Zek. But whispers of unrest reached the mansion, rumors of a new rival, a shadow moving in the city's underbelly. Melissa saw it in the tension of his shoulders, the late-night calls he took in his office, the guarded glances of his men. One morning, as snow blanketed the city, Melissa found Stephen in the kitchen, his hands dusted with flour as he helped the children bake cookies. The triplets sat on the counter, their faces smeared with chocolate, while Stephanie bossed her brothers, her voice a miniature echo of Melissa's. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong," she scolded, and Stephen laughed, his eyes crinkling with joy. Melissa watched, her heart swelling, but a flicker of unease stirred as she noticed a new guard at the door, his radio crackling urgently. That night, as the children slept, Stephen found her in their bedroom, the city's lights casting a soft glow through the windows. "Melissa," he said, his voice low, his hands reaching for hers. "There's something you need to know." His tone was heavy, and her heart sank, fearing the return of the shadows. "What is it?" she asked, her dark eyes searching his. "Is it the business again?" He nodded, his jaw tight. "A new player, someone from New York. They're testing me, thinking I'm weak after Detroit. I've kept them at bay, but it's not over." He pulled her close, his arms a haven. "I'm trying to get out, Melissa. For you, for the kids. But it's a slow fight. I need you to trust me." She rested her head against his chest, the steady beat of his heart, a reminder of his survival. "I do trust you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But I'm scared, Stephen, not for me, but for them." She gestured toward the children's rooms, her love for them a fire that burned through her fear. "I'll protect them," he vowed, his lips brushing her forehead. "I'll protect you. Whatever it takes." His words were a promise, but the city outside whispered of danger, its pulse a warning of what lay ahead. The days grew shorter, the winter deepening, but the mansion remained a sanctuary. Stephen took the children sledding in Lincoln Park, their laughter echoing as they tumbled through the snow. Melissa joined them, her scarf trailing as she raced Ashton down a hill, her heart light, despite the weight of her fears. Yet the rumors persisted, a name whispered among Stephen's men, a threat that loomed like a storm on the horizon. One evening, as she tucked the triplets into bed, Andrea's tiny hand clutching hers, Melissa overheard Brian's voice in the hall. "He's back. He knows about the family." Her blood ran cold, but she forced a smile for her daughters, kissing their foreheads. She found Stephen in his office, his face grim as he studied a map. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her chest. He looked up, his eyes dark with resolve. "An old enemy," he said. "Someone I crossed years ago." "Melissa, he's coming for us, but I won't let him win." He stood, pulling her into his arms, his touch a promise against the gathering storm. "We'll face this together." As the winter deepened, the mansion became a fortress. Its guards doubled its windows, locked tight. Yet within its walls, love flourished. Melissa and Stephen danced with their children in the ballroom, the triplets giggling as they spun. They cooked together, the kitchen filled with the scent of spices and laughter. Each moment was a rebellion against the darkness, a testament to the family they had built. But the city outside was restless, its shadows growing longer. Melissa felt it in the quiet moments, as Stephen's hand lingered on hers, as if memorizing her touch. She knew their peace was fragile, a flame that the winds of his past could snuff out. As she stood on the terrace, the city's skyline, a jagged promise, she vowed to protect her family, to hold on to this love, no matter what lay ahead. Thank you for joining Melissa and Stephen on their journey through love and danger. If their story has touched your heart, please like, comment, and share to spread the word. Subscribe for more tales of passion and resilience, and let us know what you want to see next in this saga of a family fighting for their future.